6 speakers coming up. Each speaker has 20 slides to present. Each slide lasts for exactly 20 seconds, no more, no less. If any speaker overruns on a slide, too bad, because they're going to have to just carry on as if they hadn't and not panic and stuff. So hopefully they'll do better than I'm doing at this link. Yeah, so 6 of us coming up on stage, 1 or more will come out alive. Nobody knows who, I don't know. I'm one of the speakers. I don't know if I'm coming out alive, so I'm taking a huge risk coming on here. As you can tell, I'm mostly ad-libbing. So, we've had some great talks today, haven't we? Can we have a round of applause for all the speakers we've had so far? Can we have a round of applause for all the organisers we've had setting up this amazing event? And now, could we have a round of applause for the head honcho at Full Indie UK. This is meant to come off a lot more smoother. The head honcho at Full Indie UK, the lone developer at Grey Alien Games. He recently published Regency Solitaire. I needed to practice this last night. He recently published Regency Solitaire on PC and Mac, which is already making big waves in the casual game space. He is Mr. Jake Burkett.
Great, thanks for the intro. Alistair, okay, ready? Go! Hello, I'm Jake Burkett from Grey Alien Games, and I'm going to talk about the long tail of indie games. So I've been indie since 2005 and making games for a lot longer, and I've collected a lot of sales data over the years, and I'm going to share that information with you tonight. Oh, does it say elapsed? Yes, oh there we go. So I've made quite a lot of games, there's some of them, I've made a few more. These are casual downloadable games for PC and Mac, which are mostly bought by 70-year-old women in Florida who send me pictures of their dogs and things like this, and fan mail and so on. But there's a lot of depth to these games, a surprising amount. Those games have enabled me to spend some of my spare time making mini-games and doing game jams. Has anyone done 1 game a month? Anyone joined in with that? So that's a great initiative. I did that in 2013 and made 12 games. It was fabulous, and I do other game jams. And I suggest that you do as well to boost your skills and knowledge and have creative fun. So this was the first commercial game I made, Xmas Bonus. It's a holiday-themed, Christmas-themed match 3. I used programmer art and stock music, and I even used the Comic Sans font. So none of these came together to make a perfect storm, and this game didn't sell very well. It sold less than $2,000 in 9 years, so that isn't really a very successful game. But it didn't cost much to make, so I wasn't out of pocket, and it sold more than 1 copy, which actually is reasonably encouraging. So I think we've got another slide. I have to ramble. Come on. Yes, there we go. So it didn't take too long to make because I made it on top of an existing engine, but ultimately it's made me £4 an hour, that game, after 9 years of revenue. Now my son wouldn't mow the lawn for £4, and I had to support a family with this sort of money. So to be honest, most people would call that a fail. But as I said, I learned a lot about making games, I learned about the market, I learned about what I did wrong, and the very fact it sold any copies made me think, well, maybe I can do this again, and I can do this better, and I can move forwards. But I was very naive when I first went indie, I must say that. Maybe I still am, but you might need a little bit to survive. So I just moved this graph up so you can see the bottom, hopefully. This is 9 years of sales from that game. It's very crap, you know, these are little 1 sale or something in June. But the thing is, the game is still selling. Look, it's still selling 9 years on. Right? So what if I made a decent game that has the same long tail? So I made Holiday Bonus. It's another Christmas-themed match 3. You might be sensing the theme here, but this time I paid an artist and a musician, and I spent a lot longer on all these fancy particle effects and so on. And this game is actually much loved, and every year I sell quite a lot of them, and it sold $90,000 worth so far. So By all accounts, I guess that's a success. It didn't cost much to make. That's nearly 50 times return on investment. It's approaching that. That's also when I learned that you have to spend money to actually make money. So instead of making art yourself, pay someone to do a decent job. So it didn't take very long on top of my existing engine, and it's made me £120 an hour. That's definitely better than £4 an hour when you look at things. And that's so far, because weirdly, every year there's this thing called Christmas, and it comes around and you know, my game is on sale, and people buy my game. And this is the long tail for that game. So these spikes are the Christmas, and there's a lot of sort of extra spikes at this end. And that's because of a whole bunch of stuff I did to re-promote the game and get it in front of people again, years after it launched. And I'm going to talk about how I did that in a minute. First though, if you look at the sales data in aggregate per year, look at the first 2 years. They're really bad. In fact, the first 5 years are not very good. And this is the most recent 5 years. So, you know, think about where your game is that you're making. Maybe it's in the first year now, and you've no idea what could happen with the rest. So the first year I made 6% of the total revenue so far, and that number's going to go down. It's going to be 5% soon, and who knows. So you might be in a similar position, looking at your sales from the first year thinking, oh my gosh, you know, how can I survive? But longer term, anything can happen, especially if you work at it. So I got the game on new portals later on, because the market's changed, and portals we said no before took it. And I got the game localized. We had talks about localization this morning, and that made a lot of money. 20 hours I spent, and it's made $20,000, the localized version. So that's a pretty good return. And I made a gold version, which I made more levels and slapped a gold label on it, and everyone loved it, and you know, that helps promote things. So here's another game. This is a typical long tail where it has a spike at launch and it dwindles down. This huge spike is I made a deal with a mobile publisher 7 years after the game came out and made like $20,000. So anything can happen with IP. Once it's yours and you own it, weird stuff can happen. So yeah, it's made a similar amount of money to the other game. I've also made a game called Spring Bonus, which is about the spring, and it's a suitable, similar amount of revenue, but in a shorter time period, because I've got things better at it. Spooky Bonus, that was my last game. That's a Halloween themed game. That's actually done very well, and what's really interesting, it's only just over a year old, and look what's going to happen in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. There's a lot of interesting opportunities along the way. And this is actually the revenue from 6 of my games. This doesn't include any consultancy work or contract work I've done. But you can see, you know, it's rubbish first year and it's been building up, it's been getting bigger, there's a big spike. I've just launched another game, there should be another big spike. And that is, you know, 9 years of revenue from my company, which I'm sharing with you, because I want you to know that being indie is a long-term game. And you can go to GDC and see a talk about the latest sort of one-hit wonder, but I want you to know that you can build a business, and if you stick at it long enough and are determined, you can succeed. So thank you very much.
All agree that was a pretty fantastic talk. So the next speaker we have coming up on stage, and I want another great big round of applause for him. We have another, yet one more lovely one-man band. We've got quite a few of those. Can I hear a big cheer for one-man bands and one women band? And one child band. One Direction. Anyone? Oh, come on. They make legitimate music. Do you have any believers in the house?
Harry Styles till I die.
You're all rubbish. Alright, so this is a Mr. Adam Russell. He is the creator of Impatient Squirrel, which has just launched on iOS recently. He is going to tell you all about improving player experience through signposting. Take it away.
Hello, I'm Adam Russell, founder and designer of As Design Games. As Alistair said, it's a one-man band, me, from Birmingham, and Impatient Squirrel came out on the 7th of January to iOS. Working on an Android version at the minute, which is hopefully coming out in the next couple of weeks, but I've been saying that for the past 6 weeks. So, Good user experience is potentially becoming a much bigger thing because of the amount of freemium games out at the minute. People aren't financially invested in games, so they're not going to stick around if they're a little bit confused or they don't know where they're meant to be going. As a designer, you should always know where you want the player to go and what you want them to do. Of course, you know how a player gets from point A to point B, but will the player know? And good signposting can mean the difference between a happy player and a frustrated one, and a frustrated player isn't likely to be your player for very long. Navigation can be an issue even in small games. So rather than starting out by creating some beautiful AAA graphics, perhaps a better starting point would be deciding how you want a player to progress through a level or through your menu systems. Maybe create a path from A to B and then build the world around that. Too fast. So Super Mario has some very clear signposting, as you can see there, with a big red arrow pointing up. But even without the big arrow, the position of coins there shows you that you can go up there, and if you follow that line of coins, you'll get a star coin. And again here, the placement of the lungs within Raymond's Rumble Run shows the player that they can jump up and wall jump between these two rocks. They could carry on running down below, but if they jump up, they're going to get the actual rewards. And it also shows players in future that they can do that kind of move within the game. Candy Crush Saga, they want you to spend money. So the biggest button there is big, it's green. The one they don't want you to do says give up on it, which is negative language, of course. And obviously green is also the international symbol for go. Cityville as well, Zynga want you to share news to your Facebook feed. So the only two buttons here, one is big and green, and share coins now, and the other one's this little tiny X button. Which you'll notice in any online social game you play, that's always the smallest one, and some even grey it out as well, just to really be dicks about it. Maps also a very good form of signposting, and by using icons within the map as well, it helps the players kind of find their way. If you imagine starting off a game of GTA without knowing where your mission checkpoint is, you'll be driving around for days. However, don't overclutter your maps. By all means, have different icons and different types, so shops or missions or whatever, but make it easy for players to filter out so it just shows the shops. Landmarks in games are also a great form of signposting. I remember running out onto Hyrule Field and seeing Death Mountain, and I wanted to go there just because it was this interesting thing on the landscape with the ominous cloud and things showing. Also, start of Half-Life 2, you see the Citadel, and you want to go there even before you know that you need to go there. And it's so much taller than everything else. You're going to look up at it, and go, oh my god, and take it down with a crowbar. NPCs are a really great way of signposting and guiding players, because they can actually interact with you, the player. So if you've been running off and going to Death Mountain instead of Hyrule Castle, you'll be instructed with a friendly, hey, listen. And then NPCs can also give you new items as well. So in games like Zelda, if you get an item within a dungeon, you know that you're going to need that item to defeat that dungeon boss, or even get out of that very room. Audio. Audio is another great way of kind of guiding players. I'm sorry to keep banging on about Zelda, but the Lost Woods are a great example of this. When you're presented with 3 different routes, and only one is going to lead you forward, you've got to listen out for music to kind of guide your way. Audio can also be used to warn of danger, and good audio can also help visually impaired players play as well. Visual distinction is another one. So if you've got a lost penguin and you're walking around the volcano world, it's probably not where the penguin lives. so you want to be going to the ice world. Similarly with items, a fire spell is going to be more effective within the ice world than an ice spell is. Textures as well, level it again. If you see kind of a cracked wall, you're going to put a bomb there and blow it up, and you're going to reap rewards from that. And it's all just ways of showing the player that you can do this, and if you're stuck somewhere and you see like a different texture or some vines, it's like, oh, vines then, you are applying those, new location, off you go. You can also just blatantly just tell them what to do, but never assume that a player can or will read any English. So combine this with a little animation. So on here, the tilt start text does also wobble a bit. So whatever game you make, you don't necessarily want to handhold the player. You want to give them kind of gentle nudges and cues, and not just stick them on rails, unless that's the kind of game you're wanting to make from the off. So there are loads more examples of ways of guiding the player and signposting. So chat to me on Twitter, and I'll probably find an example from Zelda. And while I have you all here, please download Impatient Squirrel from the iOS App Store today.
Great stuff, thanks very much. Real thought-provoking, certainly getting me thinking. So, we've had two speakers, it's time for a third speaker. He is an author of speculative fiction, from soaring sky pirate adventures to strung-out surrealist post-apocalyptica.
I didn't realise you were going to read that bit.
Why did you put it on your website? You know it's a mouthful as well. Like, it's quite hard to read aloud, but I like it. I mean, seriously, like surrealist apocalyptica is like that's
Like a metal band name.
Excellent.
Do you play any instruments?
No, I'm using
Not yet. We're going to make this happen.
Now I found out I can be a metal band.
Alright, so this man is the author of Uncharted Skies. He is Mr. Tom Batty.
Yeah, awesome going. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Tom and I'm a writer and narrative designer. I write novels and short stories. I also write interactive fiction and video games. You're going to have to excuse me relying on these notes a bit. This is the first time I've done this talk rapid fire style, so I can't use my normal presentation method of just saying all the things that come into my head until I run out of time. Now, emotion has been a focus of games ever since designers started telling stories more complex than save the princess from the big baddie in the castle. And in order for designers to tell good stories, you often need characters in the game that players can empathise with. Now this is David Cage, and he's the somewhat dubious inspiration for my talk today. Cage has made games such as Fahrenheit, Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls. And he's somewhat notorious for developing games that aspire to be interactive cinema, but too often fall short of both interactivity and cinema. Now, Cage came on stage during the reveal of the PlayStation 4 in 2013, and he demoed this somewhat creepy-looking old man head. He spoke a lot about how increased processing power allows designers to create better, more expressive characters. His keynote suggested that with the power of the PS4, he'd finally be able to build characters that can express emotion with their facial features alone. And this is something of an obsession for the AAA industry right now. A lot of modern games, like The Order here, do look like something taken from a cinema screen, but does that make their characters easier to empathise with? Sure, Cage's old man face can express a range of complex emotions, but then so does Link from Wind Waker here. The thing is, and anyone with an animation background will back me up here, we don't actually need a ton of complexity to be able to identify something as human with human emotions. People will empathise with a rock if you draw a suitably sad face on it, and that's a trick that cartoonists have been using for years. This is Bambi, the Disney classic responsible for childhood trauma across the world. And now Bambi doesn't make us sad because it has hyper-realistic drawings of deer. It makes us sad because of the way the characters are presented in the story. You don't need realistic graphics to make people cry. So how does this relate to video games? I'm going to talk a bit about the death of Ares in Final Fantasy VII, which is about as close as video games have come to a Bambi-style moment of unifying sadness. When Sephiroth kills Aerith in the middle of the game, she's gone forever, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who's played that game. And I think it's about the one spoiler in video games that I'm allowed to do. So surely everybody knows that now. But I think the key thing to Aerith's death is that when we lose her, we lose a key member of our party, and we never get a replacement for her. And that's something that only video games can do. It's possible that until this point she's been a crucial party member. You might have been relying on her as a healer, you might have spent hours trying to unlock her final limit break, only to have all of that taken away. When we lose her, we lose gameplay options. And that's something you can only do in games, not in static fiction. By making characters a core part of gameplay, and by integrating their stories into their mechanics, designers can create an emotional connection between a player and a character that just isn't possible in a non-interactive medium. So how can we do that in a game that isn't a 60-hour epic RPG? I'm going to list a few examples, starting with Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. Now, Brothers is unique because it ties the movements of its two main characters to the control pad simultaneously. Players will spend most of the game learning to control both brothers at once, with either analog stick. Now, at first, that's a pretty frustrating experience, but it pays off later on in the game when one of the brothers is taken away. At this point, the player feels that character's absence as actual physical loss. Our gameplay options are cut in half, and players feel that loss through the actual controller itself. In that game, we're only half as useful when we're playing alone. Now this is FTL, which might seem like an odd choice, being as it has no script at all and its characters are all randomly generated pixel people. But if you try naming your characters after your best friends, then you're going to feel a tug of emotion when you have to blast them all out of an airlock to stop your whole ship catching fire. And this same goes for any game that lets you invest time and personality building up a team of characters. And that's something else only games can do. By letting players customise elements of the game, they'll feel a greater personal attachment to the game and a stronger emotional sense of empathy towards the characters. You might not care about sacrificing another random Marine, but if that Marine's named after your partner, you'll probably think twice before sending them on a suicide mission. And this is Darkest Dungeon, and it's a roguelike that tasks your group of characters with tackling a particularly unforgiving dungeon. And what sets this game apart from other dungeon crawlers is the way the adventure takes its toll on the mental health of the characters in the game. Your characters become exhausted, anxious, depressed, or otherwise diminished as they move through the game. And what makes this matter to the player is that the character's mental state affects how they perform in combat. A depressed character might choose not to fight, or a fearful character might hide at the back of the party. The player cares about the mental health of these characters because it directly affects their ability to progress through the game. And this is This War of Mine, a survival game set in a war zone. Like many survival games, you're tasked with scavenging for resources to keep your team of characters alive. But unlike most survival games, This War of Mine places a human cost on resource gathering. You often have to choose between the well-being of your characters and that of NPCs in the game. And these decisions have an effect on your own character's mental health as well, and thus their ability to perform actions in the game. It forces you to consider whether you can live with stealing an invalid old lady's last food supplies. It's emotionally wearing for the player as well as the characters in the game, and that's because empathy and survival are built right into the mechanics of the game. Now there are lots more examples that I could go into but don't really have time to here, but hopefully this has gone some way to demonstrating that you don't need incredibly expensive graphics engines to create emotionally engaging characters in games. What you do need is some writing skill and great game design discipline, and that's hopefully something we have in spades here. So that's all for me. Thanks for listening.
It's really good that, I mean, everyone seems to be dealing fine with the time limits. No one's been like thrown through the table yet, which is exciting. But I mean, obviously you're all baying for blood, and so like, you know, if they all do really well, like that's okay because I brought my knuckle dusters with me, so just, line up afterwards and you'll have a, real wrestle. These chairs work as like tables, don't they?
Basically.
Yeah, so I'll throw you through one of these table chairs after your talk.
Oh, fine, love.
This is Alex Kelly from Two Tails Games. Two Tails Games are an indie developer based in Oxford. I will let Alex and his incredible beard do the honours. Once he's ready, you ready?
Think so.
All right.
With things? Yes.
Get talking.
Cool. Hello. You may remember my face from being embarrassingly posted on Twitter earlier. So let's get on with it, shall we? Cool. No. So hello, I am Alex. I'm a programmer primarily from Two Tails, is an indie company based in Oxford. Around Oxford. I'm an avid game jammer, and I try and take part in game jams on a regular basis. And actually, one of my first game jams helped me get a job in the industry and be in front of all you lovely people today. So why do I want to do this talk? Primarily because people tend to talk about game jams and they say, oh, I love game jams, they're amazing, and they don't sort of talk about the kind of crippling horribleness that happens sort of halfway through. So that's not always been my experience of loveliness, so I wanted to kind of give a more balanced talk about game jams, basically. Here's the time. So for the uninitiated, I'm just going to give you a quick run through of what game jams actually are, if you don't know. They are short bursts of game development, generally revolving around a theme, with the aim to create a game in a very short space of time. Some popular examples of this are like Ludden Dare, which do 3 jams a year, and Double Game Jam, which is like 1 a year or something. So the easiest way to really take you through this is to actually take you through a game jam. So congratulations, you've all been inundated in IGC Jam 15. This is a jam. Congratulations. So there are a few important things you have to know before we start. We plan out who we're working with, the kind of tools you're going to try and work with, and maybe some thoughts on theme if you've got some time, because not all game jams let you know the theme ahead of time. So, first of all, if you want to work with your mates, that's wonderful. You get a really good chance to share your responsibilities, it's not all on your own head. You get to have some of your weaknesses covered if you're working with a team as well, because no one is an island. Personally, I go back on that and say I do tend to work on my own, but there are benefits to that as well. Like I get full creative control if I'm working on my own, and I get to work kind of to my own schedule, which is nice. Tools. When you're doing this, you can you have to plan your tools first of all. I used to start doing building a custom engine, and that ended horribly. It's a massive time sink. So I've kind of recently been using pre-built engines like Unity. But the most important thing is to make sure you know whatever it is you're working with, and that's going to take you much further than anything else really. So a theme, again, it's kind of a bit abstract concept if you're not used to game jams. A theme is the kind of core idea that your game is supposed to be based around. A good theme can be an absolute goldmine for ideas, and it's brilliant. A sort of abstract theme forces you to think outside the box. But the important thing with a theme is that it's a constraint, and constraints can always make an awesome game when you've got very little time. So, first of all, some do's and don'ts for IGC Jam 15. Make sure you get plenty of sleep. Make sure you don't eat really loads of greasy food. Make sure you go outside. A bit of a captive audience, I know. Don't end up debugging for about 5 hours in a row because the thing that worked 2 hours ago no longer does. You need to go around problems, not through in game jams. So congratulations, this is the start of the game jam. The theme is basket weaving, enjoy. So first of all, you have to brainstorm loads of ideas, get as many ideas on the table as possible. Then lose the stupid ones. You're not going to make a basket weaving MMO, it's not going to happen, you've got 2 days. Pick one really good idea from the not so stupid ideas you've got, and then plan it and plan it and plan it, break it into tiny pieces. So at this point I'll just do a little note on designing game jams in general. There are 2 main approaches from my own personal experience. You've either got the tiny and achievable and little kind of granular things, or you've got the enormous and stupid and fun and impossible games that you're never going to do. It doesn't really matter at this point because for a fact your idea is too big. So you have to kind of really break it down a bit. Make sure, still in the early stages, you plan your time. At the very start, you'll feel like you've got absolutely ages. You don't. Make sure you prioritise the key parts in the game that you want to get done and try and have a minimum viable product by sort of the halfway point, because then you've got a very easy chance of just polishing what you've got. That makes life easier for you. By the same token, don't get freaked out by how little time, when you realise how little time you actually have. Make sure you take breaks. Don't feel like you have to put your nose to the grindstone the entire time, because that's not going to make you productive. Make sure you give yourself time to unwind and freshen up, and clock watching just stresses you out, so don't do that either. It's just not healthy. So now at the halfway point, it's a very fast moving jam, you're doing great. So what you've probably got, you've got like a half semicircle in Unity or something, you can poke it and it crashes, it looks hideous, it's horrible. You've got like a list as long as your arm still to do, and it's kind of the horrible bit of game jams, is kind of a halfway point, because you're feeling all like, don't really know what to do, and you might feel like giving up. It's very stressful and it's mentally exhausting. And this is sort of the ugly side that doesn't get discussed. So on top of all that, the jamming, if you're not working as, or even if you are working on a team, can be lonely. You can kind of just like get cabin fever from working on just this one thing and being forced to do it yourself. Luckily, social media is there. Go to Twitter, it's amazing. And just like look up the hashtag for the jam you're working on, and just you get support from people on there. So now's the last few hours. Hours is very loose term. If the game is going well, if you've got kind of realistic like weaving effects going in, polish it. It'll look amazing. Not going so well, do some damage control. Slap a menu on there, make it playable. This is a brutal lesson in prioritization. You have to really get your head around it, and you have to make it playable and build it early. Well, congratulations, that was a very, very short game jam. You're at the end of IGC Jam. The game, your basket weaving game 2015 is probably a mess. It's almost definitely not what you planned in the early stages. And this is kind of the very humbling part of game jams, because you get to see what everyone else's finished product look like, whereas you know what you wanted to make in the first place. But hopefully you can make something that you're proud of. So why bother doing game jams? Because that was a mouthful, even if it wasn't stressful in real terms. You probably hate your game and everyone else's looks amazing because you've seen their end product. Hopefully you've learned something by doing a game jam, whether it's like a new technique or even like a hole in your own personal knowledge base. But thankfully with game jams there's no safer place to fail. You only lose a very short space of time when you create something. So what jams are good for? They're a great way to learn how to prototype, and they're a great way to learn how to fail faster, which is a fantastic game development tool. You learn how to improve your skills that you didn't really know you needed to use, and you can find friends through the hardship, through the Twitter and social media and stuff. It's a real good resource to find people that you can work with and things like that. So where to next? If you love your basket weaving simulator, I think it's amazing, cool. Polish it and release it. There are loads of people who've already done this. So, for examples, Alan Zucconi made a game called Orbitalis, which was made, initialized Lumdare. A guy called Daniel Linson made Roguelite, which I think is a beautiful game, at a game jam. And so why do I do it personally? Because this is a personal element. It's an amazing learning opportunity. I love learning. I love the design challenge of a very small thing going to something big. And sometimes it's a train wreck, but sometimes it's the best game you never knew you wanted to make. And it kind of makes all the crappy bits worth it. That's kind of why I do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think in terms of inspiring stuff happening in a very short period of time, that talk is, in a surprisingly meta way, quite a big success on that front. So that was really good. Thank you very much. So, coming up onto the stage now, we have speaker number 5. He's the developer of the celestial strategy game Devouring Stars. He's the developer. I need to. Does anyone mind me going out and practicing a bit and then coming back when I'm like less of a mouthful? He's the developer of Magic Shot, which is a mind-bending billiards game which is set on a kind of morphing table, which he's going to be showing as part of the Left Field collection at Resd. Is it next week? Yeah, just next week. Give it up, everyone, for Mr. Francois Alliot.
Hi, so my name is François Alliot. I'm a French indie developer. I'm going to talk to you about language in code. My ambition for this talk is to bring you my perspective on coding. It's not necessarily the best approach, but it's different, so that's always useful. I have 15 years of experience, but I have only been a game dev for just over a year, and it's really my second life. So I'm a bit like a genius. I'm at the point where I can look at the past and the future at the same time. So that's always really interesting to make a talk about that. Before being a game dev, I worked in this company, Plein Sens, in Paris, which means full meaning. So what we do is that it's a company built on semiotics. So we do use semiotics to help people talk to each other. So that's an example. That was an example for people in the suburbs of Paris. So we put together people, landowners and tenants who couldn't talk to each other around this model of the place they own or they live in, and that created a discussion that could actually work. I worked also for this little dude who's called Now. It's a robot. and I studied how it could be useful in a museum. It was very interesting because the robot is actually a very interesting bundle of science, and you could do something that's different from a digital tool, but also different from a real person. In both these projects, I worked actually on words, and how words could be used to actually improve the systems people work, or the interface they have. That's reminding of something. That's actually what you do when you code. So when you code, actually what you do is not just talk or write. The writing will be the output in a word. You actually create the structure around the talking. So you're actually creating a language in the end. And that's what I'm going to try to talk to today, so how you could build meaningful words in code. If you talk like if you code like you talk or like you write, you will end up with a Babel tower of code, like a giant construction where every room is disconnected from the other. So that's a very important distinction between talking like a stream of words without structure. So in code, words need to be pivots for meaning. So that's why I will try to explain, and I will try to explain this by maybe a different way of than regular learning to code. I will use semantics. So in semantics, words have two definitions. It has an intention definition, you notice the S, which is the meaning, the class of an object, and the extension, which is the denotation, the way the word is used in real life. I will take some example. So to take, for example, Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck is a tune, is a duck, is a funny character. That's the definition in intention. That's a superclass above Daffy Duck, if you want. That's the meaning. To notice, you could say Daffy Duck is a tune, but you can't say tune is Daffy Duck. So that's a good way to notice an intention. In extension, extension is the denotation. So that's what Daffy Duck is in real life. It's one element of the tune class, and it's this series of drawings depicting a duck. And you could actually make the thing in both ways. If you take Jonathan Blow, for example, he's a game designer, a famous Indian man, and in extension, he's a creator of bread, and he's this man. You see there's a very strong connection between the intention, which is the superclass, and the extension. The intention will define how you describe a word. So because he's a game designer, he's also the creator of bread. That works also for the President of the United States. You notice that you could define in extension by the actual real day example. So for today, Barack Obama is the extension of President of the United States. When we talk about my first method, wake up, that's the same thing. It's a method by print. That's the intention of wake up, and that the extension is something that says hello world. Okay, that's interesting, but that's very unidimensional because you don't take all what is interesting in the meaning you're bringing. So this is a quote from a poet who is called Paul Éluard. He said, "Earth is blue like an orange." And that's very interesting because he's actually opening the word, he's opening the meaning, and that's what you have to do when you code, actually. What he's doing is actually he's taking two intention definition between Earth, it's a blue object and it's a rounded object, and he's using this to bend, if you want, the meaning towards orange, because orange is also a rounded object, so Earth is blue like an orange, and is hiding the link. That's very interesting because that's playing with words is something that you could use in code too. So that's a code I wrote. It's not very nice. I'm not a really good coder, but it's quite interesting because it's different. So this is a function that creates a different sort of Perlin noise. So Perlin noise is a way to distribute randomness. So Perlin style of tormented, if you take, you have lazy, tormented, moving. I use actually the word in different meaning, like a pivot between different objects. so it's apparent still it's a vicinity landscape. If music, it's a bit tormented, and if behavior, it's a behavior that's not working. These are my two games. In the end, I wanted to say just that this way to work on pivots of meaning like pivots is actually a good way to create some sort of consistency in your game. Thank you very much.
It's like just really good that we've had a whole range of different talks. So the final speaker is going to come on and possibly be a bit of disappointment. I hope not. I hear this person is a great person. I hear he is one of the legends of the video game industry. That someone who is revered as an incredible designer by everyone in this room. Can I get some confirmation of that? Yeah. Yes. I was thinking I was going to get booed, so...
Hang on, that guy's got long hair, you haven't?
Yeah, no, hair thieves came in the night and stole it, so... Alright, without further ado, your final talk for the night is me. Let's do this. Okay.
We're ready. There we go.
Alex from Two Tails.
That's part of your time.
Hello everyone. So hopefully you know who I am already and aren't sick of me. I'm Alistair. I work as a one-man team in Bristol, do all my own coding, artwork, and also run the business, marketing, PR side of what I do. A lot of the games that I do are kind of local multiplayer games. In particular, local multiplayer games involving a lot of physical contact, people grabbing each other's arms and stuff. Tap Happy Sabotage is for giant touchscreens and up to 52 players. Dash and Bash is a party game it was at Game City as an installation, involves running around a room, bumping into each other in the middle. The talk I'm going to be doing is a talk about learning from feedback. And not just the good feedback, not just going, oh, you liked it, you didn't like it, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about listening to those lovely, nice things people say about your game and asking, what does this tell me about what I'm doing wrong? So, this is Greedy Bankers on the iPhone. This is the first game that I released on iPhone back beginning of 2011, so it's about 4 years old now. It got great reviews, really nice things, people talking about how addictive it was. Didn't sell very well, didn't get a lot of tweets about it, didn't get a lot of press attention, and actually all those positive reviews, every single one told me why. Because they all made the same point, that though this game looks really simple on the surface, it actually hides quite a complex system, and once you get into that, it's really rich and rewarding and kind of, addictive, and that was the problem. That what was special about this game, this complex set of mechanics, was hidden, that you couldn't see it unless you played the game for 15 minutes. What I needed to do was actually take that thing that was special, that they thought was special because it was hidden, and make it the thing that is special because you see it as soon as you start playing. So when I did the follow-up game, which was Greedy Bankers versus the World, I added in a multiplayer mode on the iPad where people could reach across the screen and steal from each other. Everything they stole doubled in value, so it encouraged them to cheat and get into each other's way. And I put that front and centre of all my marketing materials, all of my press emails, even in the game menus as well. And it was successful in that front. It got a lot more reviews, it got considerably better sales, it got selected for the Eurogamer Left Field collection, and even today, this is taken from the App Store in the US, where it's featured as part of a party planning section. So here's another story about lessons that I learned from positive feedback and people saying lovely things. This is a game that people said so many lovely things about that I decided not to make it. It was going to be the follow-up to Greedy Bankers, and you can kind of tell what's going on here. These are all famous politicians eating each other's heads. And I asked all my friends and family on Twitter and Facebook and by email, like to play it and tell me what they thought, and they all said lovely things. But these lovely things told me not to make the game, because they were the same lovely things that everyone said about Greedy Bankers on the iPhone. I didn't want to make the same game again, because what can I do better if people are going to respond to it the same way? I didn't want to be told that I was a good designer and get a pat on the back. I wanted people to tell me I'm mental. Because if people tell me I'm mental, there's a story to tell. There's a story worth tweeting about, a story worth writing an article about, a story worth telling a friend about at the pub. And if I'd listened to all the people telling me, oh yeah, you've got to finish this, I wouldn't have looked back at what had been so successful in creating that story in my previous work. Greedy Bankers versus the World, which was a game which had been seen getting people wrestling on the floor. And it made me wonder, what other games, what other ways can I use gaming to get people wrestling on the floor? Because that's something people go away talking about. Slamjet Stadium, follow-up game, futuristic football on hover bikes, encourages people to cheat and steal in an even bigger and broader way than Slamjet Stadium that ended up getting new and noteworthy in 61 countries. So, when you get that feedback, it's important for you to ask yourself, who am I hearing this feedback from? And how is this going to affect their judgment on it compared to someone who is buying it in the store? If you're listening to a review that you've got, ask yourself, would this person have bought the game if I hadn't sent them a promo code? And can I find that out from the words they've written about it? Would they have played the game to the end if they hadn't felt obligated to write a review? Or would they have just given up after 5 minutes? Are there clues in the text that can tell me that? An example from Greedy Bankers, everyone always commented on the satire, but it was really obvious that anyone who was playing the game would go, there's not much satire in here. So, they pointed that out. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked because I need to talk to you about talking to people, which is something I do all the time because I want to see when people's eyes light up when I describe the mechanics of my game and the branding of my game. Slamjet Stadium was the futuristic football involving cheating and stealing, and I put text encouraging people to cheat on the loading screens of the game, so that every single player who played my game, within 30 seconds of starting up the game, they knew this was a game about cheating, and they knew how to get the best experience. That was because that's the bit that people's eyes lit up about when I talked to about them. And I did the same with reviews. I sent out reviews, preview stuff for Slamjet Stadium 2 weeks into developing it, so I could find out what are the things the press are going to want to talk about. So really, the message that I'm trying to convey is you need to release your game, you need to get it out there with real users and find out what people who actually pay real money are going to respond to. And then, you need to ask, even before you release the game, you need to send out copy to press because you need to find out in written terms what they respond to and what gets them excited. And then whenever you get that piece of feedback, you need to ask why they're responding in that way and see how you can implement that in your game design. Because at the end of the day, that's the bit that users are going to see on the store, and that's how they're going to judge whether they want to buy your game. Thank you very much. The honours of closing off.
Cool, thanks Alistair for sorting out all those talks. That was awesome. Absolutely awesome.